The gunshot that tore through the night air was what woke Zachary Morrison. But it was the sound of hooves pounding toward his camp that made him reach for his rifle. He rolled from his bedroll in one fluid motion, years of tracking outlaws through the Arizona territory having taught him to move fast when danger came calling. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely enough light to see by, but he could make out the silhouette of a horse and rider charging straight toward him through the mesquite and sage. His finger hovered near the trigger until the rider came close enough that he could see it was a woman. Her dark hair wild around her shoulders, her dress torn and dusty. She pulled her horse to a stop so hard the animal nearly sat back on its haunches, and before Zachary could say a word, she threw herself from the saddle and stumbled toward him. Her eyes were wide with terror and desperation, and when she grabbed his arm, her fingers dug in with surprising strength. "Please," she gasped, her chest heaving as she fought to catch her breath. "You have to help me. They took my sister. Please, I will give you anything, everything I have, but you have to help me get her back." Zachary lowered his rifle slowly, studying her face in the dim firelight. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Blood stained the sleeve of her dress, though he could not tell if it was hers or someone else's. Her horse stood behind her, foam flecking its mouth and flanks, worked nearly to exhaustion. "Slow down," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "Who took your sister?" "The Garrett gang," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "They rode into our ranch 3 hours ago. They killed our foreman and 2 of the hands. They took Hannah and said they were heading for the border. Please, I know who you are. You are Zachary Morrison. People say you are the best tracker in the territory. You have to help me." Zachary felt something twist in his chest at the mention of the Garrett gang. He knew them, had been hunting them for 6 months now. For men, all of them mean as rattlesnakes and twice as poisonous. They robbed stages, rustled cattle, and left a trail of dead men behind them wherever they went. The law had wanted them for murder in 3 territories, and the bounty on their heads was substantial. But they had never taken hostages before, which meant something had changed, and that made them even more dangerous. "What is your name?" he asked. "Hope Dalton," she said. "Our ranch is 10 miles south of here, near Quartz Hill, California. We just moved there 6 months ago after our parents died. It is just Hannah and me now, and those men, they said terrible things about what they would do to her. I barely got away. Please, every minute we waste is another minute they have her." Zachary made his decision in an instant. He might have been a bounty hunter, a man who made his living tracking down the worst humanity had to offer, but he had a sister too, back in Missouri. He understood what Hope was feeling, that clawing desperation that came from knowing someone you loved was in danger and you were powerless to stop it. "Get your horse some water from my canteen," he said, already moving to saddle his own mount. "We will leave in 5 minutes. Can you ride?" Hope nodded, though he could see her hands shaking as she took his canteen. "I can ride. Then we ride hard and we ride fast. The Garrett gang knows this territory, but I know it better. If they are heading for the border, there are only 2 routes they can take from Quartz Hill, and one of them has been washed out by the flash floods we had last week. That means they will have to go through Devil's Canyon, and that gives us a chance to cut them off." He threw his saddle over his horse, a big bay gelding named Copper who had carried him through more tight spots than he could count. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he secured the cinch and tied down his bedroll. He checked his rifle, made sure his Colt revolver was loaded, and grabbed extra ammunition from his saddlebags. Hope watched him with those desperate eyes, and he could see her trying to hold herself together, trying to be strong. "How old is your sister?" he asked as he mounted up. 20, Hope said, swinging into her own saddle despite her obvious exhaustion. "She is all I have left in this world." Zachary nodded and spurred Copper forward. The moon was high and bright, providing enough light to see by as they rode out of his camp and headed east. Hope kept pace beside him, and he had to admit he was impressed by her horsemanship. She rode like someone who had grown up in the saddle, her body moving with the horse rather than against it. "Tell me what happened," he said as they rode. "Every detail you can remember." Hope took a shaky breath. "We were getting ready for bed. Hannah had just finished washing the dishes from supper. I heard the horses first, 4 of them coming fast up the road. Our foreman, Sam, went out to see who it was. I heard shouting and then gunshots. By the time I got to the window, Sam was on the ground and the other hands were trying to fight back. But these men, they were ruthless. They shot down Pete and Carson like they were nothing." Her voice caught, and Zachary saw her swipe at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I told Hannah to hide in the root cellar, but she did not move fast enough. The door burst open and 2 of them came in. One was tall and thin with a scar across his face. The other was shorter but built like a bull. The tall one grabbed Hannah and she screamed. I tried to fight him off, but the other one hit me and I went down. When I came to, they were riding away with Hannah tied to a horse. I ran to the barn, got a horse and rode after them for a while, but I lost their trail in the dark. Then I remembered hearing about you, that you were camping somewhere in this area. I just started riding and praying I would find you." Zachary processed the information quickly. The tall man with the scar would be Jack Garrett himself, the leader of the gang. The shorter one was probably Bull Henderson, Jack's right-hand man. The other 2 would be the Clancy brothers, both of them crack shots and meaner than sin. "Did they say anything about why they took her?" he asked. Hope shook her head. "Just that they needed insurance. That the law was getting too close and they needed something to bargain with." That made sense, Zachary thought grimly. The law had been closing in on the Garrett gang for weeks now. There was a federal marshal in the territory who had sworn to bring them in, and word was that he had a posse of 20 men searching for them. Taking a hostage was the kind of desperate move men made when they were running out of options. They rode in silence for a while, the horses eating up the miles beneath them. Zachary's mind was working through the possibilities, mapping out the terrain ahead and thinking about where the gang would go. Devil's Canyon was a natural choke point, a narrow passage through the hills that opened up into the desert beyond. If he could get there first, he could set up an ambush. But that was a big if, and it all depended on whether the gang stopped to rest or kept pushing through the night. "Why are you helping me?" Hope asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Zachary glanced at her, surprised by the question. In the moonlight, she looked young and vulnerable, but there was steel underneath that vulnerability. She had ridden through the night to find help for her sister. That took courage. "I have a sister," he said simply, "and I have been hunting the Garrett gang for 6 months now. They have killed at least 8 men that I know of and probably more. They need to be stopped, and if I can save your sister in the process, then that is what I am going to do." Hope was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Thank you. I mean it. Thank you." They pushed on through the night, stopping only once to rest the horses and let them drink from a stream. Dawn was just starting to break over the eastern horizon when they reached the entrance to Devil's Canyon. Zachary dismounted and studied the ground carefully, looking for signs of passage. It took him only a few minutes to find what he was looking for. Fresh hoof prints, for horses moving fast. "They came through here about an hour ago," he said, straightening up. "We are closing the gap." Hope looked exhausted, her face pale in the early morning light, but her eyes were still fierce with determination. "Then let us keep going." Zachary shook his head. "We need to be smart about this. If we just charge in, they will hear us coming and they might kill your sister. We need to get ahead of them, find a place to set up an ambush." "How?" Hope asked. "If they are ahead of us." "There is a shortcut," Zachary said. It is rougher terrain, harder on the horses, but it will get us to the far end of the canyon before they do. We can be waiting for them when they come through. Hope nodded immediately. Then let us take it. The shortcut was every bit as rough as Zachary had warned. They left the main trail and climbed up through the rocky hills, the horses scrambling over loose scree and navigating narrow paths that barely qualified as trails at all. More than once, Zachary thought they might have to turn back, but Copper and Hope's mare proved to be sure-footed and determined. By the time they reached the far end of Devil's Canyon, the sun was fully up and both horses were lathered with sweat. Zachary found a good position behind a cluster of boulders that overlooked the canyon mouth. From here, he could see anyone coming through, and he would have the high ground advantage. He dismounted and pulled his rifle from its scabbard, checking the action and making sure everything was in working order. "Stay here with the horses," he told Hope. "When they come through, I will handle it." But Hope shook her head stubbornly. "No, that is my sister down there. I am not hiding. You will get yourself killed," Zachary said bluntly. "These are professional killers, Hope. This is not a game." "I know it is not a game," she shot back, her eyes flashing with anger and fear. "But I am not going to sit here and do nothing while you risk your life for my sister. Give me a gun. I know how to shoot." Zachary studied her for a long moment, weighing his options. He could see that she was not going to back down, and part of him respected that. Finally, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a spare revolver, an older Colt Navy that he kept for emergencies. "Stay behind cover," he said, handing it to her. "Do not shoot unless I tell you to. If things go wrong, you get on your horse and you ride for Quartz Hill as fast as you can." "Understood." Hope took the revolver and nodded. "Understood." They settled in to wait, the tension stretching between them like a wire pulled taut. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the desert heat began to build. Zachary kept his eyes on the canyon, watching for any sign of movement. Beside him, Hope was silent, but he could feel her anxiety radiating off her in waves. "Tell me about your sister," he said quietly, as much to distract her as out of genuine curiosity. Hope was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Hannah is good, better than me. When our parents died of fever last year, she is the one who kept us going. She is the one who said we should sell the farm in Kansas and come out here to California to start fresh. She believed we could make something of ourselves, build a new life. She is always seeing the good in people, always believing things will work out." "And you?" Zachary asked. Hope gave a short, bitter laugh. "I am the practical one, the one who worries about money and drought and whether we can afford to keep the ranch running. Hannah says I worry too much, that I need to have more faith. Maybe she is right. Faith is good," Zachary said. "But so is being practical. Out here, you need both." "What about your sister?" Hope asked. "You said you have one." Zachary nodded, his eyes still on the canyon. "Elizabeth. She is 2 years younger than me. She lives in Missouri with her husband and their 3 children. I have not seen her in 5 years, but we write letters when we can. She is always trying to get me to give up this life, settle down somewhere, find a nice woman and start a family. Why do you not?" Hope asked. It was a good question, and one Zachary had asked himself many times. "I guess I never found the right reason to stop. This life, hunting outlaws, it is what I know. It is what I am good at. I tell myself I am making a difference, making the frontier a little safer. But the truth is, I do not know if I would know how to be anything else." Before Hope could respond, Zachary caught movement at the mouth of the canyon. He raised a hand, signaling for silence, and brought his rifle up to his shoulder. For riders were coming through, moving at a steady pace. Even from this distance, He could make out Jack Garrett's tall frame and the way Bull Henderson sat his horse like a block of granite. Behind them were the Clancy brothers, and between them, tied to a horse and looking terrified, was a young woman with blonde hair. "That is her," Hope whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "That is Hannah." Zachary took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was the moment that would decide everything. He could take them all out from here, but he had to be careful not to hit Hannah in the crossfire. He lined up his shot, aiming for Jack Garrett first. Take out the leader and the others might lose their nerve. But before he could pull the trigger, something unexpected happened. One of the Clancy brothers suddenly reined in his horse and pointed directly at their position. Somehow, impossibly, they had been spotted. "Damn it," Zachary muttered, and then all hell broke loose. The gang scattered, diving for cover as Zachary squeezed off his first shot. It caught one of the Clancy brothers in the shoulder, spinning him out of his saddle. The others returned fire immediately, bullets pinging off the rocks around them. Hope crouched beside Zachary, the revolver in her hand, but she held her fire like he had told her to. "They have got Hannah behind that outcropping," Zachary said, his mind racing. "We cannot get a clean shot without risking hitting her. Then what do we do?" Hope asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the bullets flying around them. Zachary made a quick decision. "I am going to circle around, come at them from the side. You stay here and keep them pinned down. Do not expose yourself. Just make them think there are more of us than there really are." Before Hope could argue, he was moving, scrambling down from their position and working his way around through the rocks. He could hear Hope firing the revolver now, measured shots that echoed through the canyon. She was doing good, keeping them occupied. It took Zachary 10 minutes to work his way around to the side, and by the time he got into position, his shirt was soaked with sweat and his heart was pounding. From here, he could see Bull Henderson crouched behind a boulder, and beyond him, Jack Garrett was holding on to Hannah, using her as a shield. Zachary took careful aim at Bull Henderson and fired. The big man went down with a cry, clutching his leg. That brought Jack Garrett's attention around, and for a moment, their eyes met across the canyon. Zachary saw the calculation in the outlaw's eyes, saw him weighing his options. "Let the girl go, Garrett," Zachary shouted. "It is over. You are surrounded." Jack Garrett laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Morrison, I should have known it would be you. You have been dogging my trail for months now. Well, come and get her if you want her so bad. But I guarantee you, she will be dead before you take 2 steps. Zachary's mind raced. He needed to buy time, needed to find an opening. "The law is coming, Garrett. There is a marshal with a posse of 20 men less than an hour behind me. You have nowhere to go. But if you let the girl go, I will give you a horse and a head start. That is more than you deserve, but it is the best offer you are going to get." It was a bluff, but a good one. Garrett would not know whether Zachary was telling the truth or not. For a long moment, the outlaw was silent, clearly thinking it over. Then he shook his head. "I do not believe you, Morrison. I think it is just you and whoever is up there shooting at us. And I think you are not willing to risk this pretty little girl's life. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to throw down your weapons and step out where I can see you. Then you are going to let us ride out of here. If you do that, maybe I will let her go once we are clear of the territory." Zachary knew that was a lie. Garrett would kill Hannah the moment he did not need her anymore. But before he could respond, Hope's voice rang out from above. "Hannah, are you all right?" Hannah's head came up, her eyes searching for her sister. "Hope? Oh God. Hope, please help me." The desperation in Hannah's voice seemed to break something in Jack Garrett. His attention wavered, just for a second, and that was all Zachary needed. He moved fast, coming out from behind cover and closing the distance. Garrett saw him coming and tried to bring his gun around, but Zachary was faster. He fired once, the bullet catching Garrett in the shoulder and spinning him away from Hannah. The girl broke free, running toward Hope's position. The remaining Clancy brother tried to grab her, but Hope fired the revolver, the bullet kicking up dust at his feet. He dove for cover, and in the chaos, Hannah made it to the rocks and scrambled up to where Hope was waiting. Zachary kept his rifle trained on Jack Garrett, who was on the ground now, clutching his wounded shoulder. Bull Henderson was still down, groaning with his leg wound. The Clancy brother who had been shot in the shoulder was slumped against a rock, looking like he had passed out from blood loss. The last brother had his hands up, clearly surrendering. "It is over," Zachary said, moving forward carefully. "Do not make me kill you, Garrett." The outlaw looked up at him with hatred burning in his eyes, but he was smart enough to know when he was beaten. He let his gun fall from his hand and slumped back against the rocks. Zachary kept his rifle on them while he gathered up their weapons. He used rope from his saddlebag to tie them up, making sure the knots were tight and secure. The one who had been shot in the shoulder was still breathing, but he was going to need a doctor soon. Bull Henderson's leg wound was not fatal either, though he was cursing a blue streak. When he was satisfied that they were no longer a threat, Zachary climbed back up to where Hope and Hannah were. The two sisters were wrapped around each other, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. The relief on their faces was so intense it made Zachary's chest tighten. Hope looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "You did it. You saved her. I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to thank me," Zachary said. "I am just glad she is safe." Hannah pulled back from her sister and looked at Zachary with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. "Thank you so much. I thought I was going to die. They said such terrible things." "You are safe now," Zachary said gently. "That is all that matters." They rode back toward Quartz Hill with the captured gang members tied to their horses. Zachary kept a careful watch on them, making sure none of them tried anything stupid. Hope and Hannah rode together, Hannah sitting behind her sister with her arms wrapped tight around her waist. Every so often, Zachary would hear one of them sniffle or murmur something to the other, and he gave them their space to process what had happened. By the time they reached the outskirts of Quartz Hill, the sun was starting to sink toward the western horizon. It had been over 24 hours since Hope had ridden into Zachary's camp, and the exhaustion was starting to catch up with all of them. But they pushed on, making their way to the sheriff's office in the center of town. The sheriff, a grizzled old man named Tom Brennan, looked up in surprise when they rode up with their prisoners. His eyebrows shot up even higher when he recognized Jack Garrett and his gang. "Well, I will be damned," he said, coming out onto the porch. "Zachary Morrison, is that you? And you have got the Garrett gang. There is a $5,000 bounty on these boys." "I know," Zachary said, dismounting. "But first we need a doctor. 2 of them are wounded." Sheriff Brennan nodded and sent his deputy running for the town doctor. Then he helped Zachary get the prisoners into the cells, securing them behind iron bars. Once that was done, he turned to Hope and Hannah, his expression softening. "You girls are the Dalton sisters, are not you? I heard about the attack on your ranch. I am sorry about your foreman and the hands." "They were good men." Hope nodded, her face pale. "Thank you, Sheriff. We will need to make arrangements for them." "I will help with that," Brennan said kindly. "You just worry about yourselves for now. You have been through hell." The doctor arrived and tended to the wounded gang members while Zachary filled out the necessary paperwork for the bounty. It was full dark by the time everything was settled, and Zachary found himself standing on the porch of the sheriff's office, looking out at the quiet street. Hope came out to join him, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Hannah is sleeping," she said quietly. "The doctor gave her some laudanum to help with the shock. He says she should be fine, physically at least. The rest will take time." Zachary nodded. She is tough. She will get through it. Hope was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft. I do not know how to thank you for what you did. You saved my sister's life. You saved both our lives. You would have done the same for her, Zachary said. You rode through the night alone to find help. That took more courage than anything I did. Hope shook her head. No. What you did, walking into that gunfight, risking your life for someone you did not even know, that is real courage. I will never forget it. She stepped closer, and before Zachary quite realized what was happening, she was kissing him. It was soft and tentative, her lips warm against his. For a moment he was too surprised to respond, but then something in him gave way and he kissed her back. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I am sorry, Hope said, her cheeks flushing. I should not have done that. I do not know what came over me. Do not apologize, Zachary said, his voice rough. I am glad you did. They stood there for a long moment, the night air cool around them, the sounds of the town settling in for sleep. Zachary felt something shifting inside him, something he had not felt in a very long time. Maybe it was the way Hope had looked at him, with such trust and gratitude. Maybe it was the courage she had shown, or the fierceness with which she loved her sister. Whatever it was, it made him want things he had long ago given up on. Where will you go now? Hope asked. Back to tracking outlaws? Zachary thought about it. A week ago, the answer would have been simple. Of course he would go back to tracking outlaws. It was what he did, who he was. But now, standing here with Hope beside him, he found himself questioning that certainty. I do not know, he said honestly. I guess I have not thought that far ahead. Hope looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. You could stay, at least for a little while. Hannah and we could use help getting the ranch back in order. And I would like to get to know you better, if you are willing. It was a simple offer, but it carried weight. Zachary knew that if he stayed, it would mean something. It would mean opening himself up to possibilities he had avoided for years. It would mean taking a chance on something more than just the next bounty, the next hunt. I would like that, he said finally, and the smile that broke across Hope's face made his decision feel right. Over the next few weeks, Zachary found himself settling into a rhythm he had not known in years. He helped Hope and Hannah repair the damage to their ranch, rebuilding fences and hiring new hands to replace the ones who had been killed. The work was hard and physical, but there was something satisfying about it, something that filled a space inside him he had not realized was empty. Hannah recovered slowly from her ordeal, though there were nights when she woke up screaming from nightmares. Hope was always there for her, patient and loving, and Zachary found himself admiring the strength of their bond. They had lost so much, but they still had each other, and that seemed to be enough to keep them going. As for his relationship with Hope, it grew deeper with each passing day. They would sit together in the evenings after the work was done, talking about their lives and their dreams. Hope told him about growing up in Kansas, about the hard winters and the harder work of keeping a farm running. She told him about her parents, about how much she missed them, and about the fear that she and Hannah would not be able to make it on their own. Zachary found himself opening up to her in ways he had never opened up to anyone. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, about learning to track from his father, about the day he had left home to make his own way in the world. He told her about the men he had hunted, the dangers he had faced, and the loneliness that had become his constant companion. Why did you keep doing it? Hope asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. If you were so lonely, why did you not find something else? Zachary thought about it for a long time before answering. I guess I felt like it was all I was good at, like if I stopped, I would not know who I was anymore. But being here with you, helping you and Hannah, it has made me realize there is more to life than just hunting down bad men. There can be something to build, something to care about. Hope took his hand, her fingers warm and soft against his calloused palm. I am glad you stayed, she said quietly. I know Hannah is too. You have become important to us, Zachary. To me especially. He looked down at her, at the way the fading light caught in her dark hair and made her eyes shine. You have become important to me too, he said. More important than I ever expected. They kissed then, long and slow, and Zachary felt something inside him finally settle into place. This was what he had been searching for without even knowing it. Not just a woman to care about, but a place to belong, a reason to stop running. As summer turned to fall, Zachary made his decision official. He rode into Quartz Hill and officially retired from bounty hunting, turning in his credentials to the federal marshal. The marshal was disappointed to lose one of his best trackers, but he understood. Every man has a right to settle down when he finds the right reason, the marshal said, shaking Zachary's hand. Sounds like you have found yours. Zachary could not argue with that. He proposed to Hope on a crisp October evening, down by the creek that ran through their property. He had bought a simple gold ring in town, nothing fancy, but Hope cried when he slipped it onto her finger and said yes without hesitation. They were married in the small church in Quartz Hill on a Saturday in November, with Hannah standing up as Hope's maid of honor and Sheriff Brennan serving as Zachary's best man. The whole town turned out for the celebration, and Zachary found himself genuinely moved by the warmth and acceptance they showed him. These people knew what he had been, knew the violence he had lived with for years, but they welcomed him anyway because he had saved one of their own. The wedding night was tender and sweet, and when Zachary held Hope in his arms afterward, he felt a peace he had never known before. This was home. This was where he belonged. Hannah moved into the bunkhouse to give them privacy in the main house, though she took her meals with them every evening. She seemed to bloom in the months after the kidnapping, her nightmares fading as she threw herself into the work of running the ranch. She was courted by a young man from town, the son of the general store owner, and by the time spring arrived, she was engaged herself. Zachary and Hope's first year of marriage was not without its challenges. There were droughts and sick cattle and a grass fire that nearly destroyed their north pasture. But they faced it all together, and somehow that made even the hardest days bearable. They learned each other's rhythms, learned how to work together and support each other. By their first anniversary, Hope was pregnant. She told him one morning over breakfast, her eyes shining with joy and nerves, and Zachary felt his heart swell so large he thought it might burst. He was going to be a father. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. Their son was born the following spring, in April of 1879. They named him Samuel, after Hope's father, and he had his mother's dark eyes and his father's strong jaw. Zachary held him for the first time and felt tears streaming down his face. This tiny, perfect creature was his, and he vowed then and there that he would do everything in his power to give him a good life. Hannah married her young man that summer, and they built a house on the far side of the ranch property. The two sisters remained as close as ever, raising their children together and supporting each other through the ups and downs of ranch life. Hannah had her first child, a daughter named Grace, less than a year after Samuel was born, and the two cousins grew up more like siblings. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Zachary took to ranching like he had been born to it, his tracking skills proving just as useful for finding stray cattle as they had been for finding outlaws. He and Hope added to their herd, improved their land, and built a life that felt solid and real. They had two more children, a daughter named Rose in 1881 and another son named Jacob in 1884. The house that had once felt too big for just Hope and Hannah was suddenly bursting with noise and life and love. Zachary would come in from the range at the end of a long day to find his children running to greet him. Their faces lit up with joy, and he would marvel at how different his life had become. There were hard times too, of course. They lost a whole season's worth of calves to disease one year, and another year the drought was so bad they nearly went under financially. But they weathered it all together, Zachary and Hope working side by side to keep their family and their ranch afloat. On their 10th anniversary, Zachary took Hope into town for a rare evening out. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant and danced in the saloon that had been converted into a community hall. As they swayed together to the music, Hope rested her head against his chest and sighed contentedly. "Are you happy?" she asked quietly. Zachary tightened his arms around her. "Happier than I ever thought I had a right to be. You saved me, Hope. That night you rode into my camp, you saved me just as surely as I saved Hannah. You gave me a reason to stop running, a reason to build something that lasts." Hope pulled back to look up at him, her eyes shining with tears. "We saved each other," she said, "and we built this life together. I love you, Zachary Morrison. I love you more than I can ever put into words." "I love you too," he said, and kissed her there in the middle of the dance floor, not caring who was watching. As they rode home that night under a sky full of stars, Zachary thought about the man he had been 10 years ago. That man had been alone, drifting from town to town with nothing to tie him down and nothing to call his own. He had been good at his job, sure, but he had been empty inside, going through the motions of living without really feeling alive. Everything had changed the night Hope rode into his camp. She had been desperate and terrified, begging him to save her sister, and he had said yes without really thinking about what it might mean. He had just wanted to help, wanted to do the right thing. But in saving Hannah, he had found hope. And in finding hope, he had found himself. The ranch came into view, the lights from the windows warm and welcoming in the darkness. He could see Hannah's house in the distance, smoke curling from the chimney. His children were asleep inside, dreaming whatever dreams children dream. His life, his family, his future, all of it waiting for him. Zachary helped Hope down from her horse and pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. She fit against him perfectly, like she had been made to be there. "Come on," she said, taking his hand. "Let us go home." And they did, walking together toward the life they had built, toward the family that was waiting for them, toward a future that stretched out bright and full of promise. The wild frontier that had once been Zachary's whole world had been tamed, at least in this one small corner of California. But what he had gained was worth so much more than what he had given up. He was no longer a lone bounty hunter drifting through the territories. He was a husband, a father, a rancher. He was a man with roots and responsibilities and people who depended on him. He was a man who had found his place in the world. And it had all started with a woman riding into his camp in the middle of the night, begging for help. As they reached the porch, Zachary paused and looked back at the vast expanse of land that was now his home. The California night was cool and clear, the stars overhead bright enough to light their way. Somewhere out there, other men were still hunting outlaws, still living the life he had once lived. He did not envy them. He had found something better. He had found love and family, and a place to call his own. He had found everything that mattered. Hope tugged on his hand, pulling him toward the door. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Zachary smiled and followed her inside. "Just about how lucky I am," he said. "How incredibly, impossibly lucky." And as he closed the door behind them, shutting out the night and the past and everything that had come before, Zachary Morrison knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Samuel grew into a strong, serious boy who loved working alongside his father, learning everything he could about cattle and horses and the land. Rose was spirited and fearless, always getting into mischief and making everyone laugh. Jacob was the quiet one, more interested in books than ranching, though he did his share of work without complaint. Zachary and Hope watched their children grow with a mixture of pride and wonder. There were times when Zachary would catch himself watching them play and feel overwhelmed by how much he loved them, how much they meant to him. These were the moments that made all the hard work worthwhile. Hannah's family grew too. She and her husband had 4 children in total, and the ranch became a place of noise and laughter and constant activity. The cousins were inseparable, running wild through the property and creating adventures out of everyday tasks. Sunday dinners became a tradition, with both families gathering around Hope's big table to share food and stories and fellowship. In 1890, when Zachary was 45 years old, he received a letter from his sister Elizabeth in Missouri. She wrote that she and her family were thinking of moving west, that they had heard such good things about California and wanted to start fresh. Zachary and Hope immediately wrote back, inviting them to come stay at the ranch while they got established. Elizabeth and her family arrived that summer, and the reunion between Zachary and his sister was emotional and overwhelming. They had not seen each other in nearly 16 years, and there was so much to catch up on. Elizabeth took to Hope immediately, and the 2 women became fast friends. Elizabeth's children fit right in with the pack of cousins already running around the property. With Zachary's help, Elizabeth's husband found a good piece of land about 20 miles away, and they began building their own ranch. But the 2 families remained close, visiting often and supporting each other through good times and bad. As Zachary moved into his 50s, he began to slow down a bit, letting Samuel take on more of the day-to-day responsibilities of running the ranch. It was bittersweet, watching his son step into the role he had held for so long, but it was also deeply satisfying. Samuel was good at it, maybe even better than Zachary had been, and he knew the ranch would be in capable hands. Rose surprised everyone by announcing at 17 that she wanted to become a teacher. She moved into town and began working at the schoolhouse, proving to be patient and kind with even the most difficult students. Jacob, true to his quiet nature, became a lawyer, studying through correspondence courses and eventually passing the bar exam. He opened a small practice in Quartz Hill, handling property disputes and contracts for the ranchers and businessmen in the area. Zachary and Hope became grandparents when Samuel married at 22 and had his first child the following year. Holding his grandson for the first time, Zachary felt the years fall away. He remembered holding Samuel just like this, remembered the overwhelming love and terror and joy. Now here he was, watching his son experience the same thing, and the circle of life felt complete and perfect. On a warm evening in the spring of 1895, Zachary and Hope sat together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. They were in their early 50s now, their hair streaked with gray, their hands marked by years of hard work. But they were healthy and happy, and they had built something that would last beyond their lifetimes. "Do you ever think about that night?" Hope asked, reaching over to take his hand. "The night I rode into your camp?" Zachary squeezed her fingers gently. "All the time," he said. "I think about how scared you were, how desperate. I think about how close I came to just sending you away, to telling you it was not my problem." "What made you say yes?" Hope asked. "What made you decide to help me?" Zachary thought about it, trying to remember the exact moment he had made that decision. "I guess I saw myself in you," he said finally. "Or maybe I saw what I wanted to be. You were willing to risk everything for your sister. That kind of love, that kind of loyalty, it reminded me of what really matters in life. And I think part of me was tired of being alone, tired of drifting. When you asked for help, it gave me a chance to be part of something bigger than myself." Hope leaned her head against his shoulder. "I am so grateful you said yes. I cannot imagine what my life would be like if you had not. Hannah and I, we might not have survived. And even if we had, we would never have had this, all of this." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them, at the house they had built together, at the life they had created. "We would have been alone," she continued. Two women trying to make it in a hard world. But you gave us more than just rescue. You gave us a family, a future. You gave us everything. Zachary felt his throat tighten with emotion. Even after all these years, Hope had a way of getting to the heart of things, of saying exactly what needed to be said. You gave me everything too, he said. Before I met you, I was just surviving, just going from one day to the next without any real purpose. But you showed me what it means to really live. You taught me how to love, how to build something that lasts. I was the one who needed rescuing, Hope. You just did not know it at the time. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. The sounds of the ranch settled around them, familiar and comforting. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear Samuel calling to one of the hands. Closer by, Hope could hear Rose's laughter as she played with her nieces and nephews who were visiting. We did good, did we not? Hope said softly. We built something real here. We did better than good, Zachary replied. We built something beautiful. As the years continued to pass, that beauty only deepened. Zachary and Hope grew old together, their love mellowing and strengthening with time. They watched their children have children, and then their grandchildren have children. The ranch they had built together became a legacy, passed down through the generations. Hannah lived to be 73, passing peacefully in her sleep with her sister by her side. Hope grieved deeply for the loss of her sister, but she took comfort in knowing that Hannah had lived a good, full life. The bond between them, forged in tragedy and strengthened by love, had never wavered. Zachary and Hope celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1928, surrounded by more family than they could have ever imagined having. The house was packed with children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all of them gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. As Zachary looked around at all the faces, some familiar and some belonging to the youngest generation he was only beginning to know, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. His life had been so much richer than he had ever dared to hope. That frightened, lonely bounty hunter who had been camping alone in the desert 50 years ago seemed like a different person entirely. Hope caught his eye across the crowded room and smiled, that same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. She made her way over to him, moving a bit slower now but still graceful, still beautiful in his eyes. "Happy anniversary, my love," she said, slipping her hand into his. "Happy anniversary," he replied, pulling her close. "Thank you for riding into my camp that night. Thank you for giving me a reason to stop running." "Thank you for saying yes," Hope whispered. "Thank you for saving my sister, and for saving me, and for giving me this beautiful life." They kissed then, soft and sweet, and the room erupted in applause and cheers. Their family, their legacy, their future, all celebrating the love that had started it all. Zachary Morrison died peacefully in his sleep in 1932, at the age of 87. Hope held his hand as he slipped away, whispering words of love and comfort. She followed him 2 years later, unable to bear being without him for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, under a sky as vast and blue as the one that had watched over them for so many years. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren came to pay their respects, sharing stories about the remarkable couple who had built an empire of love from a single act of courage. The ranch they had created continued to thrive, run now by Samuel's children and their families. The land that Zachary and Hope had worked so hard to improve and protect remained in the family, a testament to their vision and their dedication. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting and the air was still, the people who lived there swore they could feel the presence of Zachary and Hope, still watching over the land they had loved, still together even in death. Their story became legend in Quartz Hill, told and retold through the generations. The tale of how a desperate woman had ridden into a bounty hunter's camp begging for help, and how that single encounter had changed both their lives forever. It was a story about courage and love, about second chances and the power of saying yes when someone needed help. It was a story about how even in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, beauty and tenderness could bloom, how even the hardest men could be softened by love, and how even the most frightened women could find the strength to save not just themselves but also the men who rescued them. It was quite simply a story about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built something extraordinary together. A story about how love, once found, could transform everything. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy Zachary Morrison and Hope Dalton left behind. Not just the ranch or the family or the material things they had accumulated, but the proof that love, real and true and lasting, was possible even in the wildest of places.